Hello again and welcome. So for today's video, we're going to have another standard deck tech, which we call as the June Windgrace. As we refer to June, it is the Reminiscing, or the black, red, green color tricolor combination, in which this version again goes inside with the new mythic from Dominaria United, Lord Windgrace, or the soul of Windgrace, as we call it. So we're going to evaluate this cut avatar ability. It is a 4 to cast 5/4. The casting cost is one of each of the June colors. Whenever the soul of Windgrace enters the battlefield or attacks, you may put a land card from your graveyard into the battlefield, tap under your control. So it has its 3 activated abilities, one of each for each color. You may pay green to discard a land card, you gain 3 life. You may pay 1 Coloration Red, discard a land card, you draw a card. Or you may pay 3, which is 1 black and 2 colorless or 2 of any mana. Discard a land card, and Solo Windgrace gains indestructible until the turn, and you tap it. So basically it is a 4-drop utility creature, at the same time having a 5 toughness, a 5 power. This disposal makes it a good threat in the attacker in this setup. So how do you combine usually for a June deck? In my experience, basically we go with the best cards in this format and go with the most value, combining the best creatures and also the best spot removals in the standard. So we can attest that if you have experienced the deck or a similar familiarity with this format, we can already identify what these cards or what these instant or sorceries that are spot removal worthy for this deck, and also what other creatures that can be added. So we're going to review again the 15 creatures aside from the Soul Windgrace that was mentioned earlier for 3 copies. We also have 4 copies of the Bloodlight Harvester. We now know actually how it goes. It is also good 2-drop by itself. It has ability to kill off creatures and has the blood token to cycle out your cards from your hand. So 4 copies of this. It is then partnered with a 3-drop with Graveyard Trespasser. This is also best card, probably one of the best 3-drops black cards in Pioneer, and also has become a staple in black-based decks in Standard. So you can also remove a graveyard, and the benefit of removing a creature card from a graveyard is gets you to have its opponent lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. And the bonus, when you're able to flip this for a 4/4, it becomes a good attacker with the ability that whenever it attacks, it can exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. So that's benefit for each of these creature card exiled, having it the opponent lose 1 life and you gain 1 life. So basically having 2 triggers, which means having them lose 2 life and you gain 2 life in this process. So 2 copies in this in the deck. So along with this setup, we also have the 2-drop of Tenacious Underdog. So basically do 2-drop with the utility ability of Blitz in the late game, having to just pay 2 life and pay 4 in this setup. Also good to trade out early on because of the good power of ability of 3 that can basically get a good attack if left unchecked. So now with its combo, we have a late game scenario of the setup of the creatures of Workshop War Chief and Titan with this 3. So the Titan does not really need to be elaborated as it becomes a staple for most of the mid-range green-based decks. It has this ability of basically a utility in the 7/7 which is trample in itself. It can also protect itself by having a shield counter on a creature you control, or also summon a companion with the 4/4 Green Rhino Warrior creature token. So 2 copies of this in the main, and partner with it is Workshop Warship. It is a 5 to cast 5/3 trample creature Rhino Warrior, in which you can gain 3 life in the process, but when it dies, it can create a 4/4 Green Rhino Warrior token as a bonus when it dies. So you can also have an option to blitz this out by paying 6 instead of the usual 5, in which it can become haste, and whenever this creature dies, draw a card. You basically just sacrifice it at the beginning of your next end step, but at the same time you get the bonus 4/4 and you get to draw a card in this setup. So with these good quality creatures in this setup, it is then partnered by this very useful June color associated cards with the Fable the Mirror Breaker. That's not really given for the given setup of most of these decks, because of ability to fix out creatures with this Lumin Shaman, fix your hand also, and do some shenanigans with having to have this reflection of KGK online with the rest of your creatures. So along with it, they also added the Cruelty of Geeks. So 3 copies of this in the main. This is a new card from Dominaria United with the Read Ahead ability, in which you can just choose any of the chapters. Either you can start with one or just look directly into 3, depending on the scenario of the board of your opponent. So the bonus is that you can have them to discard a planeswalker or creature card from your hand, or you can search library for a card and just lose 3 life in that effect. But you can also have this third chapter wherein you can put a third creature card from a graveyard into the battlefield under your control. So bonus, good setup to tutor, but the 3 life is just a mere disadvantage on this. But at the same time, you can also get to revive a creature card from graveyard to the battlefield under your control. So by this scenario, you are looking at to revive maybe a Whitechapel Chief or even a Titan Industry to go back into play and do some lethal damage and effect to your opponents. So along with the 3 copies of Cruelty of Geeks, we also have Myth of Massacre. So this also given a sweep for this black base deck. No other information needed to discuss about it. And for your spot removals, I'm glad that they brought that again. Unleashed Inferno because of the prevalence of most of the enchantments and artifacts. Not to mention that was the Reckoner Bunkbuster that you've seen on the left side. This card can basically destroy that artifact or enchantment an opponent controls, given that you can just pay 4 to deal 7 damage to any target creature or planeswalker. And the bonus, you can basically get a 2-for-1 for them in most scenario wherein the board advantage can be out of your favor, but whenever you cast this card, that basically turn them around. You can destroy their best card draw or best card draw and attacker in a sense, and also deal with the best creature or planeswalker with the given the 7 damage, in which most of them will not really like to subscribe, unless there are of course certain creatures that has some protection abilities that can negate this. So anyway, 3 copies of this in the main, making sure that you have enough to be able to draw this early on and deal with the relevant creatures or enchantments artifacts in the process. So with this 3 copies, is also covered by 2 cutdowns for aggro with this limited ability, but on having 1 mana is just very beneficial for your early game. And also partnered with 3 copies of Vaulted Search, also a 1 to cast spot removal, but can basically deal 4 with just sacrificing an artifact. So along with these spot removals, again, I mentioned you have your utility artifacts in the form of Reckoner Bunkbuster. This is probably the most popular card now in the metagame. As you've seen, it has become a good mana sink for a card draw, and at the same time it becomes a 4/4 attacker in the late game by producing a pilot with a colorless 1/1 pilot creature that can crew this and attack for 4 and if needed on the setup. So that overall is the main deck. Now we'll get for the sideboard is basically go with the mana fix of having 4 copies of Jatura's Proving Ground for the Rebirth Tears and some utility cards, Trenuma. But in this deck, you choose to have 4 copies of Rebirth's Overlook instead, because this ability that can fetch Swamp, Mountain, or Forest card from your library and put it on battlefield top, and at the same time it goes to benefit with the Soul of Windgrace ability, wherein it can put a land card from your graveyard back to the battlefield top. So basically more filter effects and more of these basic lands being fetched this setup. So overall, with this Pain Land fix and some Purplusan also with Death Cup Blade, it to make sure that your mana fix already by the 3rd turn would be enough for that you can be able to cast the needed creatures or spells for your deck to carve out well and do the most optimized play in the setup. So that's about it. I hope you checked on this. Lastly, but we're going to check on the color distribution. The same with the of the 3 colors, almost the same, almost equal card distribution with black 14, green 14, and red 13. But the average mana cost is 3, so basically you can work out the deck early on by turn 3. But with those few 2-drops there, you can also get to have them by turn 2 and turn 3 in the process and be aggressive depending on the scenario of your opponents. And lastly, the deck tokens. which standard would really require many of these treasures to have or copies to represent any of the effects or the abilities of your cards. So again, that's the wrap up for this June Windgrace deck. I really like to try this one on Arena, but I'm sure will need to extract more of my wild cards to have these cards given to my pool. But we'll surely see that I'll ask a friend to do this playtesting for you guys to enjoy and to learn more about this deck archetype. Last but not the least, don't forget to subscribe for this channel for more Magic the Gathering standard deck builds and also other MTG news and related info. That's about it. Thank you for checking this video and until the next time.